A young father's world is shattered when his 7-year-old daughter makes a chilling revelation about her stepmother. Tormented by growing suspicions, he sets up hidden cameras throughout their luxurious home to monitor his wife's behavior when he's away at work. But nothing could have prepared him for what he discovers when he finally decides to hide in the bedroom closet one afternoon, pretending to be at the office. What unfolds next is a shocking tale of deception, betrayal, and a secret that will change their lives forever. Please like this video to follow the rest of this incredible story, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories like this one. Mark Anderson's life seemed to embody the American dream. At 35, he had built one of New York's most successful real estate development firms from the ground up, with luxury properties spanning Manhattan's most prestigious neighborhoods. His penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, with its sweeping views of Central Park, was the epitome of success. But 3 years ago, tragedy struck when his beloved wife Sarah lost her battle with aggressive breast cancer, leaving him alone to raise their daughter Emma, who was just 4 at the time. The first year after Sarah's death was the hardest. Mark struggled to balance his growing business empire with being a single father, watching helplessly as Emma withdrew into herself, missing her mother desperately. It was during this dark period that Victoria entered their lives, seemingly like an angel sent from heaven. She was a former model turned interior designer, with striking blue eyes and an elegant presence that commanded attention in any room. More importantly, she appeared to genuinely connect with Emma, bringing smiles back to the little girl's face. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a fairy tale wedding just 8 months ago. Victoria moved into their penthouse, and for a while everything seemed perfect. She redecorated their home with exquisite taste, hosted elaborate dinner parties for Mark's business associates, and always presented an image of the perfect stepmother and wife. Mark felt like he'd been given a second chance at happiness. But over the past few months, subtle changes began to surface. Emma, who had finally started to come out of her shell, became increasingly withdrawn again. Mark noticed she would push her food around her plate at dinner, barely eating, and would flinch whenever Victoria came near her. When he asked if everything was okay, Emma would just nod silently, but the light in her eyes had dimmed. At first, Mark attributed these changes to normal adjustment issues. After all, blending families took time, and Emma was still processing the loss of her mother. Victoria assured him it was just a phase, suggesting that Emma might benefit from therapy to help her cope with all the changes in her life. Her concern seemed genuine, and Mark trusted her judgment. However, things took a darker turn one evening when Mark was tucking Emma into bed. The little girl, clutching her beloved stuffed rabbit, a last gift from her mother, grabbed his hand with unusual urgency. Her small fingers were trembling, and Mark noticed faint bruising around her wrist that he hadn't seen before. "Daddy," Emma whispered, her voice so low he had to lean in close to hear her. "When you're not home, Victoria," she trailed off, tears welling in her big brown eyes, so much like her mother's. "What about Victoria, sweetheart?" Mark prompted gently, trying to keep his voice calm, despite the growing dread in his stomach. "You can tell me anything, you know that." Emma glanced fearfully at her bedroom door, as if expecting Victoria to appear at any moment. "She says if I tell you, something bad will happen to you," she replied, hugging her rabbit tighter. "She says no one will believe me anyway because I'm just a stupid little girl, and you love her more than me now." Mark felt his blood run cold. The fear in his daughter's voice was real, raw, and completely at odds with the perfect family image they presented to the world. Looking at Emma's tearful face, he saw something he had been blind to before: genuine terror. "Emma, honey, I need you to tell me what's happening when I'm not here," he pressed. But Emma just shook her head violently, burying her face in her rabbit. "I can't, Daddy. She'll know. She always knows," Emma whimpered. She says if I tell, she'll send me away to a place where I'll never see you again." In that moment, sitting on the edge of his daughter's pink canopy bed, Mark felt his perfect world beginning to crack. The contrast between the peaceful, luxurious home around him and the fear radiating from his little girl was jarring. Something was terribly wrong in his household, and he had been too blind to see it. As he kissed Emma goodnight, promising her that everything would be okay, Mark's mind was already racing. He needed to know what was happening in his home when he wasn't there. The next morning, he would start making arrangements to find out exactly what his new wife was doing to terrify his daughter so completely. Looking back later, Mark would realize this was the moment when everything began to unravel, though he had no idea just how dark and twisted the truth would turn out to be. The following day, Mark maintained his usual routine, kissing Victoria goodbye and heading to his office downtown. But instead of immersing himself in work, he spent the morning making discreet arrangements. By noon, he had contacted a high-end security firm specializing in covert surveillance. Within hours, their technicians had installed hidden cameras throughout the penthouse, carefully concealed in light fixtures, bookshelves, and decorative elements. The feeds were accessible through a secure app on Mark's phone. For the next week, Mark watched the footage obsessively during his workday. At first, everything seemed normal. Victoria went about her daily routines: yoga sessions in the morning, lunch with friends, occasional shopping trips. Emma would return from school around 3 p.m. with her nanny Maria, who would stay until 5 p.m. when Victoria returned from her social engagements. But on the 8th day, something changed. Victoria came home early, dismissing Maria as soon as she arrived with Emma. Mark watched the footage with growing unease as Victoria's elegant facade began to crack the moment Maria left. Her beautiful face contorted with barely contained rage as she grabbed Emma's school bag, dumping its contents onto the marble floor. "What's this?" Victoria's voice was ice cold as she held up a crayon drawing. The camera caught Emma's expression, pure terror. The drawing showed 3 figures: Emma, Mark, and a woman with angel wings who was clearly meant to be Sarah, Emma's deceased mother. It's for art class," Emma stammered. "We had to draw our family." The crack of Victoria's hand across Emma's face echoed through Mark's phone speakers. He felt physically ill watching his wife grab his daughter's arm, her manicured nails digging into the small girl's flesh. "I am your family now," Victoria hissed. "That dead woman is not your family anymore. Do you understand me? Do you want everyone to think you're a crazy little girl who can't accept reality?" Emma's sobs were gut-wrenching. I'm sorry, she pleaded, but Victoria wasn't finished. "Go to your room and stay there until dinner," Victoria ordered. "And if you tell your father about this, remember what I promised. One word from me about your disturbing behavior, and he'll have no choice but to send you to a special school for troubled children. Is that what you want?" Mark watched in horror as Emma ran to her room, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Victoria calmly gathered the scattered school supplies, ripping the drawing to shreds before disposing of it. Then, as if flipping a switch, she restored her perfect appearance and began preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. The footage continued to reveal similar incidents throughout the week. Victoria's abuse was calculated and careful. No marks that couldn't be explained away as childhood accidents, no witnesses, and always followed by threats that played on Emma's deepest fears of abandonment. But what troubled Mark even more were the phone calls Victoria made when she thought she was alone. Speaking in hushed tones, she discussed bank accounts, offshore transfers, and something about the plan being almost ready. Mark recognized some of the names she mentioned. They were his business competitors, people who would benefit greatly from his company's downfall. His perfect wife wasn't just an abuser. She was apparently orchestrating something much bigger. The question was, What exactly was her endgame? And more importantly, how long had she been playing this elaborate game? Unable to confront her directly without risking whatever scheme she was planning, Mark decided he needed more concrete evidence. He would have to witness her behavior firsthand. That's when he formulated a risky plan. He would pretend to leave for an important business meeting, but instead hide in their bedroom closet. A space large enough to conceal him comfortably thanks to Victoria's extensive wardrobe renovations. As he made these preparations, Mark couldn't help but think about all the signs he had missed. The convenient way Victoria had entered their lives just when he was at his most vulnerable, her eager insistence on handling some of his personal banking to make his life easier, her seemingly perfect relationship with Emma that only existed when others were watching. He thought he had found love again, but instead he had invited a predator into his home. Now his daughter was paying the price for his blindness, and he was determined to put an end to it. But as he would soon discover, Victoria's true motives were far more sinister than even his worst suspicions. On a Wednesday morning, Mark set his plan in motion. He made a show of leaving for an important business meeting, kissing Victoria goodbye and reminding her that he wouldn't be back until late evening. Instead of heading to his office, he quietly re-entered the penthouse through the service entrance and made his way to the master bedroom closet, where he had already prepared a small surveillance setup. From his hiding place, Mark could hear Victoria moving around the apartment, humming cheerfully. The sound of her designer heels clicking on the marble floors stopped outside the master bedroom. Through a small gap in the closet door, he watched as she entered, immediately dropping her perfect housewife persona. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Everything's on schedule," Victoria spoke in a clipped, businesslike tone that Mark had never heard before. "Anderson trusts me completely. He's even added me to his main business accounts." She paused, listening. No, the brat's been keeping her mouth shut. A few well-placed threats about sending her away were all it took. Mark's hands clenched into fists as he listened, but what came next made his blood run cold. "Once the transfers are complete, we'll move to phase 2. The accident has to look convincing. That's where your team comes in." Victoria laughed softly. Poor Mark, taking his daughter on a father-daughter ski trip to cope with the tragic loss of his second wife. Who could have predicted the avalanche? Another pause. "Of course the bodies won't be found. That's the point. And with me as his grieving widow, controlling all his accounts." She smiled coldly. "By the time anyone realizes the money's gone, we'll be untraceable." Mark felt the room spinning. This wasn't just about abuse or money. Victoria was planning their murders. But before he could process this horrifying revelation, he heard Emma's voice from the hallway. "Victoria, I'm home from school." "In here, sweetheart," Victoria called out, her voice instantly transforming into sugary sweetness. As Emma tentatively entered the bedroom, Victoria ended her call and turned to face the child. "What's that behind your back?" Victoria demanded, her tone sharpening. Emma reluctantly revealed another drawing. This one showed her and Mark standing together, with Victoria drawn as a dark figure in the background, her face twisted into an angry expression. "My therapist asked me to draw how I feel at home," Emma whispered. Victoria's reaction was instant and violent. She grabbed Emma by the hair, yanking her head back. "You stupid little brat! What did I tell you about drawing these things? Do you want everyone to think you're crazy?" "You're hurting me!" Emma cried out. "I'll show you what hurt feels like," Victoria snarled, raising her hand. Mark burst from the closet before she could strike, his voice thundering through the room. "Get your hands off my daughter." Victoria spun around, her face draining of color. For a split second, her mask slipped completely, revealing something inhuman in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she composed herself, releasing Emma, who ran straight into her father's arms. "Mark, darling," Victoria's voice trembled with calculated emotion. "This isn't what it looks like." Emma's been having such difficult episodes lately. I was just trying to... Save it. Mark cut her off, holding Emma protectively. I heard everything. The abuse, the phone call, your plans for our accident. It's over, Victoria. Victoria's face transformed again, this time into something calculating and cold. She straightened up, smoothing her designer dress. You have no proof of anything. It's your word against mine. And who do you think people will believe? The grieving widow who's been caring for your troubled daughter, or a man who hides in closets spying on his family? She took a step toward them, her smile turning predatory. Besides, you really should have wondered why I chose today to discuss those plans openly in our bedroom, almost as if she glanced at her watch. I knew exactly where you were. Suddenly, Mark heard footsteps behind him. Before he could react, something hard struck the back of his head. As consciousness faded, the last thing he saw was Victoria's triumphant smile and Emma's terrified face as two large men in black entered the room. Take them both to the secondary location. Victoria's voice seemed to come from far away. Make sure they're secure. We're moving up the timeline. Then everything went black. Mark regained consciousness slowly, his head throbbing. He found himself bound to a chair in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. Through his blurred vision, he could make out Emma tied up nearby, thankfully unharmed, but terrified. Victoria stood between them, now dressed entirely in black, her previous elegant persona completely shed. Finally awake, Victoria smirked, perching herself on a wooden crate. You know, Mark, you really should have done better background checks. Victoria Winters doesn't exist. Well, she did, until I borrowed her identity after her convenient disappearance in Monaco 5 years ago. She pulled out a sleek laptop, opening it to reveal multiple bank account screens. I must admit, you made this almost too easy. So desperate for love after Sarah's death, so eager to believe in second chances. And little Emma here, she glanced at the girl with cold amusement. She tried to warn you, didn't she? Children can be so annoyingly perceptive. Who are you really? Mark demanded, testing his restraints while trying to keep her talking. Does it matter? Victoria laughed. I've had so many names. What matters is what I'm about to become, significantly wealthier once these transfers are complete. Your company's offshore accounts are particularly well-funded, darling. But as Victoria typed, her smug expression suddenly faltered. What? This isn't right. She furiously clicked through various screens, her composure cracking. The accounts, they're empty. This is impossible. Not impossible, a new voice echoed through the warehouse. Just good planning. Victoria whirled around to see Sarah, Mark's supposedly deceased first wife, step out of the shadows, very much alive and flanked by FBI agents with weapons drawn. Sarah, Victoria gasped, her face draining of color. But you're dead. I checked the death certificates, the funeral records. All carefully fabricated, Sarah replied calmly, moving to untie Emma, who threw herself into her mother's arms with a sob of relief. We've been tracking your organization for years. You're not the first grieving widow to try this scam, but you're certainly going to be the last. As FBI agents moved to secure Victoria, Sarah explained to a stunned Mark. When we discovered the cancer was terminal, the FBI approached me. They'd been investigating a string of similar cases, wealthy widowers targeted by a sophisticated criminal organization. The cancer gave us an opportunity. We faked my death, allowing me to work undercover while keeping Emma and you safe. Safe? Mark struggled with the revelation. Emma was being abused. No, she wasn't, Emma spoke up, her voice stronger now. Mommy and I were acting. The bruises were makeup. We had to make Victoria believe she was scaring me so she would let her guard down. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, Daddy. Sarah knelt beside Mark, now untying him. Emma's been incredibly brave. We needed Victoria to believe she had full control of the situation. Every abuse incident was carefully monitored. Emma was never in real danger. We had agents watching the penthouse 24/7. The therapy sessions, Mark asked, rubbing his wrists. Her therapist is FBI too, Sarah explained. Those drawings were specifically designed to provoke Victoria, to make her reveal more of her plans. When our surveillance showed you installing your own cameras, we had to adapt quickly. We used your discovery of her abuse to accelerate her timeline. Victoria, now handcuffed, spat venomously. You have no idea what you've done. The organization, they'll come for you all. Your organization has already been dismantled, an FBI agent responded. Your associates were arrested simultaneously across 3 continents. The evidence Sarah gathered over the past 3 years has been quite comprehensive. Mark's head spun with the revelations. 3 years. All this time. I wanted to tell you so many times, Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. Watching you grieve, seeing you struggle. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But we had to make your reactions genuine. Victoria's group is incredibly sophisticated. They would have detected any hint of deception. Emma hugged Mark tightly. I knew you'd figure it out, Daddy. Mommy said you would. That's why we let you find the cameras yourself. As the FBI led Victoria away, her designer facade completely shattered, Mark held his family close, still processing the incredible truth. His dead wife wasn't dead, his abused daughter wasn't abused, and his perfect second wife was a calculated fraud. But through it all, one thing became crystal clear. His family was whole again, stronger than ever. 1 year later, the Anderson family had settled into a new normal. After Victoria's arrest and subsequent trial, which revealed a criminal enterprise spanning decades and continents, Mark, Sarah, and Emma moved to a new home, one filled with genuine love and no hidden cameras. The trial itself was a media sensation. Victoria, whose real name turned out to be Elena Petrova, was a key player in an international crime syndicate specializing in defrauding wealthy individuals through elaborate long-con operations. Her testimony, given in exchange for a lighter sentence, helped authorities recover millions in stolen assets and led to the arrest of dozens of accomplices worldwide. Mark sat in his new home office reviewing newspaper clippings about the case. The headlines still seemed surreal. Black Widow crime ring dismantled. FBI's 3-year undercover operation brings down international fraud syndicate. Cancer-faking wife reveals all. The ultimate sting operation. Sarah found him there, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Still trying to make sense of it all, she asked softly. Sometimes I wonder how I didn't see through her, Mark admitted. The signs were there. That's exactly why they chose you, Sarah explained, sitting beside him. Successful, intelligent people make the best targets because they trust their judgment. Victoria's organization spent months studying you, creating the perfect trap. They knew exactly how to exploit your grief, your loneliness, your desire to give Emma a mother figure. From the garden, they could hear Emma's laughter as she played with her new puppy. A gift from the FBI team to reward her extraordinary bravery during the operation. At just 7 years old, she had played her part perfectly, helping to bring down a criminal enterprise that had destroyed countless families. The hardest part, Sarah continued, was watching you fall in love with her, knowing I couldn't warn you. Every time she touched you, every time she played the perfect wife, it took everything I had to stay hidden. Mark squeezed her hand. I never really loved her, you know. I loved the idea of moving forward, of giving Emma a normal life again, but it wasn't real. None of it was. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Richardson, their FBI handler during the operation, had arrived for her final debriefing. Over coffee, she shared the latest updates on the case. Elena Petrova, aka Victoria, will be in prison for at least 20 years, she reported. More importantly, her confession helped us identify 12 other active operations targeting wealthy families across the country. We stopped them all. "And the money?" Mark asked. "Most of it has been recovered and returned to the victims. Your company's accounts were never actually in danger. We had them protected from the beginning. The accounts Victoria thought she was accessing were all carefully monitored decoys." As Agent Richardson prepared to leave, she turned to Emma, who had come inside for a snack. "You know, Emma, you might have a future in the FBI. Not many 7-year-olds could have handled what you did." Emma beamed with pride, but shook her head. "I want to help people like Daddy, build homes for families, but maybe I can help catch bad guys sometimes too." Later that evening, as the family sat down for dinner, a real family dinner with no hidden agendas or secrets, Mark looked at his wife and daughter with profound gratitude. The past year had taught him valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of seeing what's right in front of you. "You know what's funny?" Emma said between bites of pasta. "Victoria thought she was so smart, but she never figured out why I drew those pictures exactly the way she wanted. She thought she was scary, but Mommy and Agent Kelly taught me how to make her think she was winning." Sarah smiled proudly. "That's because you're much smarter than any bad guy, sweetie." As night fell over their new home, Mark reflected on how their story would sound to outsiders. A tale of fake death, international crime rings, and a 7-year-old secret agent. It seemed impossible, yet here they were, stronger and more united than ever. "I love you both so much," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "We love you too, Daddy," Emma replied while Sarah squeezed his hand. Their ordeal had ended, but its lessons would stay with them forever. Sometimes, the greatest deceptions hide the deepest truths, and sometimes what appears to be a broken family can become whole again in the most unexpected ways.